I'm here to tell you about the future of digital, which puts a little bit of pressure on things, but hopefully I'm going to give you some insights that will be fairly practical. We'll look at the very near future, some of the things that are changing already, and I'll try and give you some insights and some tools. So essentially, I'm Daniel Rowles. I'm a trainer and consultant in digital marketing. I'll go through some of the companies I work with at the moment, but I'm here today as a member of faculty for the Chartered Institute of Marketing, which means essentially that I train on their behalf. There is something on your seat with lots of the training courses that they offer, and I deliver. That's the sales pitch. Okay. Other than that, I'm a trainer for CIM, e-consultancy trainer, and I work with lots and lots of organisations like L'Oreal, Sony, Boots, the British Council, the BBC, and so on, planning and implementing their digital campaigns. So everything from search through to social media campaigns, everything in between. My background is about 15 years working in digital, half of that running agencies, half of it working directly for clients. So I'm going to try and take that and put everything in perspective in terms of what that means for the future of digital as well. So I'll go through some key trends, what they mean to us as marketers, more importantly why they matter, and I'll try and give you some practical resources so you can actually take some stuff away from this as well and do something practical with it, okay? So I just want to go through and just use a couple of key stats that are current stats to try and set the scene a little bit for where things currently are, okay? And all of these will reflect some of the challenges that we're kind of dealing with at the moment. So in terms of volume of content uploaded to YouTube every single day now, we're at about the 8 years worth of content. So the volume of content going up into YouTube and being uploaded is absolutely vast. One of the challenges we've got is how we cut through, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about, this whole through of cutting through all the noise that's out there as well. The reality of that, though, is that how long do we actually watch a video for? So what would you kind of guess that you'd actually watch a video for? Have you got any ideas? 3 minutes, somebody said 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 2.5. Because the reality is we're not watching videos end to end. When we hear these stats about all these billions of videos being watched, they're not being watched, they're being started, and we're flicking through them. No, not enough kittens. No, right, that's the one I'm looking for. So the reality is the stats can be quite misleading on all this. So we need to look at the volume of content. We need to look at what the statistics and the analytics are actually telling us, and is it actually anything useful? Average age of a Facebook user now. Whenever you ask people this, they go and they say 18, 20, 25. They go in at the kind of lower end things as well now. It's 38. It's the middle. Because generally speaking, everyone is using Facebook in particular markets. So the reality is we need to look quite carefully at what we make assumptions about social media. So I'm going to look at that a little bit. Quick show of hands. Who has got a Google Plus account? At least 2/3 of you. Put your hands down. Who's using their Google Plus account? 4 of you. Okay, so that's one of the challenges that we're going to face, is that it's one thing having a platform, it's another thing using it. What I'm also going to tell you is that you have to have Google Plus. It's absolutely essential to your marketing. And I'll tell you why in a moment as well. Okay. So new platforms. Google Plus has got about 500 million members, actually slightly north of that now as well. So we need to look at engagement through social channels. My favourite statistic, what percentage of US children have some sort of web presence by the time they're 2 years old? Okay. 92%. There's pictures online because we upload pictures of our kids. But my favourite stat that went with this is what percentage of unborn US children have some sort of web presence? 47%. Because we upload baby scans. So the reality is we're online before we're even born. There's some privacy challenges with those kind of things as well. So we're just going to go through and look at some of these overarching themes and then try and say how that actually applies to the future as well. So one of the things I'm quite often asked is, when is this level of complexity going to slow down a little bit? If you go out there, there are probably hundreds of suppliers trying to give you these new essential services, give you new social platforms, tools, marketing automation, all these sorts of things. It's not going to slow down. It's going to get faster and faster. And the reality is that the one thing I can guarantee you is this is the slowest it will be from now on. So what we need to look at is how do we create companies that are agile enough to actually cope with this? And there's been lots of talk about big data, and there's been loads of talks there about big data, and I just want to talk about what that means in terms of a future-gazing sense, but also in terms of what it means in practice. If you look at this, we've got data from social media, data from web analytics, data from email, SEO, search optimization, paid search. If we were being really smart and doing what more than most of us are already doing now, we could put all of those bits of data into one pot, into one place, and we could create some kind of custom dashboards. And the idea of that is that we can start making more sensible decisions with data. And that big data piece is just having all this data and do something sensible with it. The reality of this is that what's generally missing from this is this little CRM piece down here. And I say little, it's not little, it's an absolute nightmare in reality. Because CRM is your customer relationship management. It's your actual customer records. Most of this stuff around it is anonymous. And what we're trying to do is connect up anonymous data to our customer data, so I know you've looked at these web pages, you've looked at these emails, you've clicked on these things, therefore if I send you this stuff, it's going to be relevant. Okay? That's the kind of joined up marketing idea. You can call it big data, you can call it smart data, whatever you like. The reality of it is that this is about IT and legacy systems, and it's complex because you're trying to get different systems plugging into each other. But once you do it, you're geared up for being a lot more agile in the future, and you're actually able then to do some smarter things. So I'll give you an example. This was an example that Disney ran for a period of time. If you went to Disneyland, selected people, you'd arrive, and you would be given an animatronic Minnie or Mickey Mouse. Okay? And as you walked around the park, this Minnie or Mickey Mouse would speak to you. And it would help you avoid the queues and say, why don't you go to Thunder Mountain? And it's only a 2-minute queue at the moment. And it would be collecting data about what rides you went on and your route around the park and so on. Smart thing is, you get back, you finish your visit, you hand Minnie or Mickey back. They've then got who you are, because you registered to come and buy a ticket. They have got your email data, because you registered at the beginning. But they also knew what ride you went on and didn't go on, the money you spent in the park and the route you took around the park. They can then send you an email a week later saying, thanks for visiting, hope you had a great time. You only went on 60% of the rides. You missed all this great stuff. Now, potentially with that, if I know that you spent enough money while you were in the park, I can get you a free ticket, because then I'll drive a repeat visit and I'll make more money from you. So I can work out the overall lifetime value of that particular customer. So what this is really about is just getting all your data together, putting it into one place, but then doing some smart things with it. There's lots of good suppliers out here, Eloqua, Marketo, and loads of others that are doing marketing automation, and it's a kind of growing trend. Rather than thinking big data, I'd think smart data. Just what data can I use to indicate what you're actually interested in? And the less broadcast that we're doing, and the more precisely we're targeting communications based on all this stuff, what we're basically doing is one-to-one communications. As much as possible, the message I give you is completely tailored to what you're interested in and what you're doing. So forget big data, just think smart data more than anything else. The other thing is to think about the transferable nature of your data, and I'll talk about this a bit more. If you did a search in Google some time ago, you might have just got some search results like this. I've searched for analytics, and here we've got a load of analytics results. What you're starting to see, and this is being rolled out, is something like this. And this is called Search Plus Your World. Okay? And what this does is I'm using Google+, and it looks at my Google+ connections, and it personalises my search results based on who I'm connected to. So you can't quite see it, but at the very top of the page, it says you've got just over 200 personal results and all your normal stuff, and anything showing up in there that's got a little head and shoulders next to it indicates the fact that this is in my search results because someone I'm connected to has liked it, recommended it, or in some way pushed that content forward. Because this is again about all that noise. If there's these 8 years of video being uploaded every day, how do I tell what's relevant and what's not? Well, actually, Google's been really smart at this already, and what they're starting to do is connect up that data and start to say, this stuff's actually more relevant to you. And we're going to talk about the idea of social proof in a moment. So the idea is that I can actually make a judgment based on who you're connected to, the kind of social things you're doing, about the search results that you want as well. Now, at the moment, this is based on Google data, what you do in Google+, the things you're searching for, and so on. In an ideal world, what I'm doing in Facebook and in Twitter and in LinkedIn would influence my search results as well. But there's a big privacy issue around that, and Facebook and Google certainly aren't going to start sharing data with each other anytime soon, I don't think. But the reality is my data starts to become more valuable, because actually it's good for me, because it's helping me get better search results, but also there's an inherent value to all these companies because they can serve up more relevant results. They're more likely to actually get people clicking and get conversions and so on as well. So if I could start moving that data around with me, that would start to be a little bit more interesting, and I want to talk about that a bit more as well. So this is the idea of social proof. So I'll give you an example. This is TripAdvisor at the bottom of the screen here, and they've got something called instant personalization. So I was logged in on my machine to Facebook. I've gone on to TripAdvisor, and it's automatically logged me in with my Facebook details. Okay? So it therefore knows who I'm connected to and who the kind of people I'm interested in are. Then when I do a search, any reviews that have been left by my Facebook friends are pushed to the top of the search results. The idea of that is I don't really know whether or not to trust the reviews in TripAdvisor. Generally speaking, I'll make some judgments on it. But if you show me a review from somebody I know, I've got a point of reference to look at that and say, well, actually, if Rachel likes this stuff, she's normally quite harsh about things. She's being really generous. It must be a good hotel. So it starts to take away that worry we have about the actual reality of data. And Google has been pretty smart about this kind of stuff as well. So the reality is social proof becomes increasingly important in your search results, in things like a TripAdvisor. And when we're buying products, we're looking at reviews from other people. If you can tell me a review from somebody I know, that instantly becomes a lot more relevant and works a lot more effectively for me as well. So just consider the idea of social proof. And it's why, if you think of Google+, rather than being a social network, think of it as a social layer on top of search, which is what Google have been describing. And it starts to make more sense in terms of it's helping me get the right search results and it's helping me get the right kind of content as well. Okay. Now, with all this comes some privacy concerns as well. You might be aware, last year Google changed their privacy policy, and essentially what they did, and they're having some arguments about a few people about this at the moment, is that they took all the data from different places, so your pay-per-click results, your search history, all those different things, and they put it into one pot. And the idea of that is they can give you much more relevant results and increased utility by putting that data in one place. So for an example, this is a quote from their frequently asked questions, okay? It's not something I've made up. And basically, if you've got an Android phone, you've opted in for location-based services, you've opted in for your diary to be accessible, it knows where you are currently. It also knows where you should be for your meeting. It also can work out that you're going to be late for your meeting, okay? So then it can update your phone, tell you you're going to be late, which I'm not sure is that useful, it'll probably be quite stressful. And also, it can tell the person that you're going to visit, potentially, how late you're going to be. So that utility is potentially already there, but it freaks people out. Because this whole idea of privacy is that, so there's a real trade-off between how much data you're giving, the increased utility, which actually Google's doing some fantastically useful things with all this, but how much we're willing to kind of give our kind of privacy or exchange data. And it's about trust at the end of the day. The realistic future of this is that there's an intrinsic value to our data, and we're starting to learn that. And actually, it may get to the point where people will pay you to opt in for things. The reality of, as a marketer, the most important thing of this is to have a value proposition. If you give me this data, I will give you this. And this is what we're going to do with the data. So if we just take it down to real basic level, if you give me an email address, you're a little bit less likely to do that than you were a couple of years ago, because you're slightly more worried about privacy now than you used to be. So quick show of hands, who has a personal Facebook profile? Okay, so okay, most people, keep your hand up for me. Who's concerned about privacy and Facebook at all? There you go, 80% of the hands stayed up. So this is increasingly something we're aware of. There's increasingly news stories about this, but I'm learning there's an intrinsic value to my data. So if I'm going to give you some data, I want to know what you're going to do with it. We will not pass on your data to anyone else. And I want to know how often you're going to communicate with me and what the risks associated with that are. So if you ask for an email address, say what you're going to do with it, say you won't pass on, and say you won't communicate more than twice a month, for example. And it's that reassurance. But you'll get to the point where you're having to really tell people what the value proposition is for their data, because increasingly as consumers we're becoming aware of that, and we're valuing it a lot more as well. The other thing, thankfully, is that we're really moving away from volume-based metrics. So it used to be, or it may be now, in maybe the majority of cases, you do a social media campaign, and someone goes, oh, how many likes have we got? How many tweets have we had? How many people retweeted? And all of this is pretty much nonsense, because it might not be the right audience, they might not actually be engaging with you. I know for a fact, if I write a blog post, and say I get 200 or 300 retweets, most of those retweets of that blog post will be in the first 2 or 3 minutes of writing it. What does that mean? It means that nobody has read it, okay? So they retweet it, and then loads of people go, oh, that would be useful for my audience, I'm going to retweet that. So they retweet it as well, and suddenly you've got all these people talking about something, and nobody's read the article in the first place, or even clicked on it to visit the website. So we need to go beyond those kind of volume-based metrics and understand how many people clicked, how many people read the article, and essentially, did they do the things I want them to do? So just a couple of things here. EdgeRank. Might be familiar with EdgeRank. EdgeRank is something in Facebook. And what it basically says is that just because you've got a like doesn't mean the people that have liked you are actually going to be seeing your stuff. Because it says if I don't actually interact with your stuff and engage with it, Facebook is going to show it to me less and less. And it can be to the fact that you've got a like, but nobody's actually ever seeing your stuff. A lot of the statistics, there's a few studies done on this, say that only about 15% of the people that have liked you in Facebook ever see the stuff that you post. Okay? So we need to think about these kind of quality scoring mechanisms. Social scoring, really important. Who here has got a Clout, has registered for Clout at all? Okay, so maybe 10 people in the room. If you're not aware, Clout, Klout.com, it's a social media scoring platform. You go in, it looks at your Twitter, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, and it gives you a score out of 100. And it will tell you how influential you are. Now, there's lots of talk about how effective it is. The reality is it used to look at 100 ranking factors. It now looks at over 400 different factors to try and work out your level of influence. but I can start to work out how many followers I've got, but actually how influential they are as well. And I'm going to come back to that point in a moment and show you where this is kind of progressing as well. So it's about engagement, it's about the sentiment. It's about social scoring, multi-channel funnels. If you're not familiar with multi-channel funnels, how many of you using Google Analytics? Show of hands for me. Loads of you, great, okay. Over half of you. Multi-channel funnels is something that's instantly available in Google Analytics once you've set up goals, okay? And goals are just people doing the stuff you want them to do, which may be filling a form in, downloading something, buying something, whatever it may be. Multi-channel funnels will help you to start understand the user journey, because we don't just do a search, buy something. We do a search, we'll go to a social website, we get an email, and there's an overarching user journey with lots of touch points. Some will be online, some will be offline. Multi-channel funnels allows you to start understanding this stuff, and increasingly marketing automation, attribution modeling, all these things are making us understand a lot more thoroughly the overall user journey. What is it that influences you to make that decision to buy the product? Was it the tweet you read? Was it the email? Was it a combination of those things? And we can start to do that in Google Analytics, which is a free tool. So there's some fantastic opportunity there. And as I said, attribution modeling, and things like RTB, real-time bidding, which allows you to target online advertising more. The key thing is you can go off and look these things up and find out what they're doing. The point is, it's not about volume, it's about really understanding the user journey, and then it's about absolutely targeting your marketing to match that user journey, but hopefully automatically. So you can kind of do that one-to-one marketing without having to go off and do the one-to-one marketing. Now, there's lots of talk, big data, all this automated stuff is going to make you 30% more money. There's been a few kind of big quotes about this thing. My view on it is that if you don't do this stuff, you won't be in business. Because the reality is, if you just keep bombarding people with messages, you switch people off. We know this from email marketing. If you just spam me the whole time, I won't bother reading any of your stuff. So actually, if you're one of the companies that doesn't catch up with this stuff over the coming years, the reality is you turn into a broadcast kind of channel and people stop listening. Whereas if you're giving me the stuff I'm interested in when I'm interested in it, and you're using this agility to do it quickly, there's a great opportunity for actually being much more effective at marketing. And it's kind of the holy grail of marketing. We know exactly what people want and we send it at the right time. And it happens automatically. That's the theory. The practice is actually a lot more complicated, but that's what we're working towards. Now, this is a quote from Avinash Kushak, who is the product evangelist for Google Analytics at Google. He's written a couple of great books on Google Analytics, so I'd really recommend them. Loads of good videos of Avinash on YouTube telling you how to do analytics, but it's my favourite quote, and it basically says, for every $10 you spend on analytics, you should probably be spending $90 on people to tell you what it means. Okay? Now, by that, I don't mean you have to go and get external consultants like me to come in and we're really important. What I mean is that actually you need to realise there is so much data, you're never going to have a problem, generally speaking, of not having enough data anymore. It's going to be having way too much data, and the analysis of that data, the analytics analysis, is actually where this becomes a little bit more engaging and interesting, because you look at the data and say, right, I think this is what I need to do with this stuff. And you try and analyse it, you do some testing, and it's an ongoing process. But without resourcing that, your analytics is essentially useless. And there's more and more and more data, and you need to actually do something with it at the end of the day. A couple of other things. How many people here have used the QR code today to scan anything? Okay, maybe 5 or 6 people, okay. Anybody got NFC on their phone where you can touch your phone onto things? 4 or 5 people as well, okay. As you can go through and do that. The reality of all these things is that NFC, the idea of it was you could just touch without having to launch an app. Like a QR code, you need to launch an app, then you need to scan it, okay. There's a bit of a barrier to using it. NFC was a lovely idea. I could just touch my phone onto something and it would happen. The elephant in the room a little bit with NFC is it drains your battery, so everyone switches it off. So then you've got to go in, switch it on, then touch on to do things. So there's nothing quite perfect yet, and there's all these different applications doing this stuff. There's some brilliant applications like Blipper that do augmented reality, and there's all sorts of things. But where things are kind of going is come towards visual search. So, for example, any of you got Google goggles on your phone? Good, 4 or 5 people using it already. Okay, so app on your phone works better on Android than it does on iOS. You would literally point your phone at something like a book, and it will bring up that book. You point your business card, it adds the contact details. It can do all sorts of clever things. They're moving towards things where, and it's in the example video, you point it at a leaf and it'll identify the tree. It can translate text for you, okay? But it gets to the point of why would I actually need a QR code when I can just point it at a magazine article and it will bring up the relevant details? So what this actually said, it's great having QR codes, it's great having near-field communications, which I'll talk about more in just a second, all these different things, but actually, Google is doing something in the background already that's going to probably make those things redundant in the long term. Because actually, if you can just point your phone at something and get more information, it's the filtering of that information that Google's already excellent at, that actually they're going to probably be able to do visually. This is a screenshot of Google Goggles searching and going through and solving a Sudoku puzzle. So you point it at a Sudoku and it solves it for you. Kind of takes the fun out of doing a Sudoku if you're into those kind of things, but it can do some really smart things. So take a look at Google Goggles. There's a great example video on there as well. So there's a trend towards this as well. Now, on that point, I want to talk about mobile marketing at the moment. Because mobile marketing has exploded this year. After about 10 years of everyone saying this is the year of mobile, it finally seems to have happened this year. I'm also going to tell you that mobile marketing is dead. And it's been and past, you're too late now, okay? So I'll talk about that in a second. Frictionless technology, great expression, bounding around at the moment. All the futurologists talk about frictionless technology. What does it mean? Making stuff easier. Basically, making it a bit more seamless. Rather than having 3 different platforms that don't really plug into each other and all these kind of things. This is a thing called Recognizer, and it's quite a sensible app. So if you're a thing like you are today, sitting in front of it, it could point the phone at me, okay? And what you'd suddenly see is it would recognise my face because I'd registered with it, and around my face you would see the slides here, my LinkedIn profile, my Twitter account, and so on. So you wouldn't have to sit there and do a search afterwards, or have your badge scanned to try and get the slides that you'll get 2 weeks later and all those sorts of things. So it's just about making things easier. So the idea of frictionless technology is the integration of everything. Now, if you're an Apple user and everything you've got is Apple, you're kind of getting frictionless technology. The second you put a PC in the mix of that, you completely lost it. And it's about trying to take those barriers away from those kind of things. So frictionless technology, it's great, but it's a bit disjointed at the moment. It's not quite there at the moment. The death of mobile. Okay, slightly controversial point for someone that's writing a book on mobile marketing at the moment, but I'll explain this. This is Google Glass. Anybody seen these things? Okay, pair of specs. Google made them. They're releasing, there's a great example video. There's lots of parody videos. Go into Google and put Google Glass parody videos. They're quite entertaining. But the reality is that I'm wearing these specs and they're kind of giving me updates. I can video things, take pictures. They can overlay on the top of things the weather, and they can tell me emails that are coming through and all that kind of stuff as well. So very engaging, very interactive. The point of why mobile, I'm saying, is dead to a certain extent is how big is this before it's a tablet? Okay? When does one stop being a tablet and one being a phone? Well, there's no thing. Is that a mobile device? Well, yeah, but it's a pair of glasses, so it does the same stuff as a phone does. When does my laptop become a tablet if I can spin the screen over? And how big is that? It's all nonsense. It's not about the things. It's about actually providing utility and making frictionless technology. So making stuff easier. And the devices will get smaller and bigger, and they'll change shape, and we'll wear them, and they'll be integrated into our clothes. And there's a load of videos out there that will be in every window in your house will be interactive and all that kind of stuff. The reality is that it's not about the device. A mobile is much too focused on the device. What we should think about is the utility we're offering and where people want to use it. And actually, if I'm in your shop and I'm scanning stuff on my phone, that's mobile, but actually it's about the in-store experience. Nothing's changed. It's actually about the user journey. And this is all very traditional marketing. But the point is, if you focus too much on mobile, you get obsessed with the device. It's not about the device. It's about the utility you're offering at the end of the day. It's the whole thing. Everyone wanted an app. Why? Apps for the sake of apps don't make any sense. Just like Facebook for the sake of Facebook doesn't make any sense. So it's really picking the right technology at the right point in the user journey, and it goes back to actually having a much more thorough understanding of the user journey so we can do those kind of things. Now, the idea of the Internet of Things, this is something else you'll hear about as well. The idea is that everything's got a chip in it, so everything can be connected, okay? And a couple of little tasters of this that we might have seen already. This is just something that sticks on the back of your phone from Barclaycard, and it makes your phone a wireless card. It's not really the Internet of Things, but it's starting to kind of have objects connected a little bit more. These are the Sony Xperia tags on the other side of here. So a Sony Xperia phone is an NFC, a near-field communication phone. So it's got a little thing in it where you can touch your phone on to trigger things. And you can put these little blue and multicoloured tags, one in your car. So you get in your car, you touch it, turns your Bluetooth on, puts up your sat-nav onto your phone automatically. You put your phone next to your bed, it turns your ringtone onto silent, and it sets your alarm for you. And that's what we're starting to see. So there's no reason, and there's been these things around for years where you take things out of your fridge and it would reorder the food for you. It's just making that a little bit more practical. So why is there no reason where things can't all be connected to the internet, so they know where they are, how full they are, and all those sorts of things? Hospitals are already using this. If you take a scalpel, it will be checked in, so they know it's in theatre. It will be cleaned afterwards, it will be checked out of theatre, and that's the most important bit, to make sure it's not left somewhere else, okay? So the reality is it's about objects being connected to the internet and actually trying to do smart things with those objects a little bit more. And we're starting to see this through NFC and through other kind of technologies as well. Now, The reality of all these exciting things, Google Glasses and all this kind of stuff, is that really the fundamentals still stand. Okay? And I've been giving this example for years, and it has stayed true throughout. If you go into Google and you do a search for the word Comcast, okay? Comcast are a very large internet service provider in the US. More often than not, when you search, depending on where you are and a few other factors, you'll see a video coming up down the bottom here. Okay? And this video is essentially one of their engineers falling asleep on someone's sofa. So if I tell you the story behind it, the engineer goes out, he's fixing the internet connection, and he has to phone his own call centre to get the internet switched back on. The call centre is so bad that he's on hold for over an hour. He falls asleep, okay? Guy videos him asleep on his couch, he posts it up to YouTube, and suddenly it springs up on the front page for their brand name, okay? So what's happened there? Bad customer service. What's the reaction? Very easy to publish stuff, okay? We all know this, it's nothing new at all. But the fundamental thing is, what does Google look at? Google looks at two things: words on the page and the amount of people linking to and talking about a piece of content. Well, this says Comcast in the title, in the heading, in the description, okay? But people think this is funny, so they start linking to it. Comcast don't think it's funny, so they threaten legal action on the person that makes the video. That makes it into a news story. Lots of people are linking to it suddenly. It goes up to the top of the search engines. We talk about it, more people link to it, and it gets traction of its own. So really, we can be really smart, but what we need to think about is actually decent product offering, customer service, all the things we've always spoken about, but we're trying to understand the customer journey a lot more, in a lot more detail, analysing it and doing something smart with it as well. If you see the video, you can go and take a look at this. 1.7 million people have watched this video. What I noticed is when I searched for it earlier, it's been banned on the basis the music that's playing in the background is copyright. That's not the best way of approaching this, because the reality is all you've got to do is change the music and the video suddenly appears again. So the whole culture of organisations needs to change, and that's the fundamental thing here, is that the old-fashioned cease and desist, you can't say that, we control everything, it doesn't work. Okay? Do a search for BP in Google and go to the image search. Okay? Anybody from BP here? Jolly good. Okay. The reality is that most of their logos are ones that are covered in oil, and they've got birds covered in oil on them, and people like Greenpeace are very good at kind of working with all this stuff. So there's lots of key trends, but the reality is the technology is changing, mobile is changing, and so on. The fundamentals stay the same. And actually it's about getting your offering right, thinking about customer value proposition and so on, but using the technologies to deliver on these things. So go and take a look at attribution modelling, go and take a look at multi-channel funnels, go and look at some of the ideas of making technology easier. But fundamentals, set objectives. The reality is the majority of digital marketing is done with no actual objectives. And when I say set objectives, I mean measurable ones that you can measure through analytics. Just because you're in B2B, that is no excuse for not actually setting measurement goals online. So, well, the purchase happens offline. Fine. That doesn't mean you can't measure actually most of the user journey online and offline as well, and integrating these kind of things. Select the appropriate channels. Don't go on Facebook and app and so on for the sake of it. There is an advantage to innovation which can generate PR, but actually you can generate PR lots of ways as well. So we're back to the traditional side of things. Measure, engage and improve. A commitment with organisations to change their culture, to be able to try things out, test from them and learn from them on an ongoing basis is going to be essential. Absolutely essential. Now, that's one of the things that will differentiate people that I think from that will fail and they're going to succeed in this space, and that means resourcing the people that actually analyse the data and make inferences and then test stuff. In an environment where if something goes wrong, you don't sack people. So you need to change the culture of organisations quite a lot as well. And then very much this is about focusing on understanding the user journey, looking at how people actually experience and deal with your product, how they buy stuff, and then being in the right places at the right time, whether that's on mobile, online, or anything else as well.